So let's go around and do a roll call. So, Rusty?
Here.
Rich?
Here.
Ron?
Here.
David?
Here.
Ken?
Here.
Teresa? Here. Okay. David, would you lead us in the invocation?
All right, gracious Heavenly Father, thanks so much for this beautiful weather we're having. We love living in Florida, in Marion County, and we'd like to, if you could inject all the wisdom you can into this board, into our staff, and especially thankful for our staff, that we can go out and do your work, and glorify your name, and make help better citizens of Marion County. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Any public comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move right into the approval of the previous minutes.
Make the motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We have Wilshire in, or excuse me, do you want to explain the microphones first? I should
There we
have-
go, that's probably good. So, today is our first day testing out this microphone system. We will have more of these, they're called goosenecks. And we tried dialing it in today. And so if you could just make sure that it's green. So hit the little button in the front. There you go. Okay, and
Share, yeah.
And the one thing about them is they're much more sensitive if you speak directly towards it. So just have the microphone pointing at you within about 6 inches when you're speaking, and then you can push it back if you're not speaking. So it just makes it clear, and just make sure you're pointing right at your mouth.
Okay.
And we'll give it a shot, and throughout the meeting, I'll try adjusting the speaker system just to make sure that we can be heard.
Okay, thank you. So we have Wilshire up, and they're already in, so we're going to jump into the investment, new business.
Nathan? That's time to leave.
Hi, Kat, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I can just hear you. We didn't hear anything before that.
There you go.
You couldn't hear me, but that was very.
Oh, co-host. Yes. I gotta make you co-host, okay?
That's good.
There you go.
Okay, so sorry, we're on the investment section. I'm just checking because up until that point, Kat, neither Evie nor I heard anything. So
Okay.
just wondering.
It's all yours. You're co-host.
Okay. So I can maybe share my screen. Full screen mode. Everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Happy to be there with you again. We'll go ahead and get started with a brief market overview to set the stage for some performance commentary coming up here in a couple of minutes. So as it relates to the month ended January, the good news is that we have started the year off on a good performance note. We saw that growth assets were up for the month, and large caps generally had a positive return across the board, while small caps were slightly negative. If we look to international markets, we saw that developed international markets had a modestly positive return, while emerging market results were negative. And then looking at core bonds, or the more defensive portion of the portfolio, they did post a slight loss, and that was due to the 2-year yield and beyond having risen modestly. If we move to the next page, Nathan, let me just touch on this monthly index performance. Here we've got index performance details, so if you wanted to know more or were curious about the performance of different styles or different segments of the market, you can see those returns here. So the 1 month, 1 year, 3 and 5 year. And we'll move past that to land on asset allocation. So here, what I'm going to focus on is the aggregate positioning to help set the stage, again, as I said, for our performance commentary. And I know this is a busy chart. I think we might have shown it to you once before, but just to recalibrate so everybody understands what we're looking at right now. The gray bars that you see for each asset class, that denotes the current minimum and maximum range as the investment policy statement stands today for each asset class. And then the black bar that you'll see, somewhere in the center of that range shows you what the actual target asset allocation is. And then the blue arrows that you'll see either, to the right or to the left of the line, if it's within the gray box, it'll be blue, and that shows you that at the aggregate level, we're within policy range. And in the case like where you were looking at the specific provider detail, which we provided in the next 3 pages, if you saw yellow, that would just be flagging the fact that it's outside of the policy range. So a couple of high-level observations here. You can see that when we roll it up at the total fund level, for the most part, we are within the range, which is what we want to see, but you will see some tilts, like for example, looking at U.S. equity or non-U.S. equity, that blue arrow is to the right, so that means we're slightly overweight to that. And again, when Nathan starts to talk about what drove performance and results, you'll understand why that has an impact on the aggregate performance numbers that you'll see and the attribution breakdown that we show you. So again, I won't go into details on the different managers' positioning, but we're aware of the fact that there are some out-of-policy positions. And in anticipation of finalizing the proposed investment policy statement here soon, Nathan and I have met with each of the providers separately to discuss where they are today and the roadmap that it's going to entail to get to the new strategic asset allocation if that is approved today. So we have begun to lay that groundwork, and pending the approval and the outcome, we'll have more details to present to you all during the April meeting so that everybody's on the same page and they understand how it is that we're going to get there.
Any questions? Okay.
Right, so I just move us on from the allocation chart. This slide here sets up, this is the monthly comparison of the market value. You can see on the left-hand column, which as at the end of January was 292 million, 0.7, to the adjusted net corpus plus inflation, which is second from the right, so the 250.4 million. So essentially over the month, what this shows is the district's buffer over the inflation-adjusted net corpus remained just over 42 million, so pretty strong as Aoife laid out. Where I'm going to spend most of my time is actually on this slide. So this is the first time we've shown you it. It is a fund attribution slide, and it's shown rolled up from all 3 providers to the total Marion County level. And so over the month, the value, as we talked about on the last slide, rose, and that's sort of reflected in the modest positive performance here in the top left-hand side of this slide with 0.43%. However, it underperforms the benchmark of 0.5%. Now, just because of rounding, that means that the actual underperformance was equivalent to minus 0.06%, or what we call 6 basis points. When we look at where that came from on the top right-hand side, it's essentially split evenly between asset allocations that on aggregate detracted very, very modestly, these are very small numbers, from performance, and then manager selection within each of the composites that we see below, which again on aggregate are detracted. On the bottom, we break it down into more detail. So the grey bars to the left and the right of those targets essentially reflect what Aoife talked about. So, for example, fixed income, that triangle was to the left side of the target line. And so we had an underweight asset allocation tilt over the month of January to fixed income. Conversely, we were overweight to US equity, non-US equity, and right at the bottom there, a very large overweight to liquid alternatives, with the majority of that being Greystone. Now, the impact of those asset allocation tilts are shown in dark green in the middle at the bottom. And so really the main detractors over the month were the overweight to non-US equity versus the overall composite, and the overweight to a liquid alternative. So obviously, with private equity, valuations only are on a quarterly basis, and so the benchmark performance for January was 0, and the overall benchmark performance was positive, hence why it detracted from performance. And then what we see in the manager value added in orange is essentially that US equity is the entire reason why, on aggregate, we marginally underperformed over the month, although that was mostly offset by positive manager selection in the other composites. So if I take the 3 managers in turn very, very quickly, what we saw for Truist over January is their whole story was manager value, in that all of their asset allocation tilts essentially sum to 0, but on the manager value add front, they were much more positioned within US equities towards small caps and had a mild value bias, both of which detracted from performance in the funds they selected. If we move to Crescent, this was a positive contributor in that they outperformed their benchmark, and you can see that on the top left-hand side, with the majority of that actually coming from manager value selection within non-US equities and their liquid alternatives in particular, names that they chose that did really well, and that actually more than offset their underperformance in US equity. And finally, Greystone underperformed by 12 basis points, and you can see here actually over half of that was due to the legacy positions, which they don't have direct control of, just given they haven't received the funds back from. So you can see in the bottom left-hand side, they have the biggest underweight to liquid alternatives, so those are the hedge funds where essentially they had a 0% allocation versus the 10% benchmark, and that offsets their very, very large overweight position to illiquid assets. So because of the market dynamics, that detracted from performance, if we add those 2 numbers together, by 7 basis points, and the other main detractor was US equities. So it looks worse than really what they can be held accountable for, but those were the 3 real movements over the month. The final slide I wanted to show before we stop and pause for any questions on the overall performance report is that this is the first month that we've shown this slide, where we've aggregated performance and we've been able to reconcile historic performance from the 3 underlying providers to be able to do this. And so essentially what this shows, when we roll up Truist, Crescent and Greystone, that we've already been over the 1 month, and obviously the quarter to date and calendar year to date performance is all the same. But for example, if we look over the fiscal year to date, so including Q4 of last year, the overall fund is up just over 8% and about 34 basis points behind the policy. And over the last 1 year, so January 31st, 2023 to January 31st, 2024, the portfolio is up 8.3% versus a benchmark of 9.6, 9.7%. And again, most of the drivers are actually quite similar to what we discussed for January, in that US equity, you'll see there, and the value-added figures, just to note, are red when they have underperformed and black when they have outperformed the benchmark. And you can see here that really it has been US equities that have been driving most of the underperformance at the overall level. So we're going to pause there and just ask if there are any questions on performance that we can answer. All right, and then I think Aoife made the point really on the IPS, which is we'll wait to hear back his decision afterwards, and we're ready to go. And you will see that asset allocation chart shift as we work through the 2-year implementation timeframe. So we'll be tracking as we go along.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
I had just a recommendation. Can we see the performance change over a period of time as when we started, and when we, say 6 months from now, actual graphic change, as opposed to going back to reference again to this old one? So we can actually see the performance change.
If I heard correctly, Doctor, I believe the question was, as we go through this implementation period, will we be tracking performance, and can we measure the OCIO managers accurately against the changing targets? Was that the question?
No, I'd like to have this graph comparison available to us as the performance changes, so we know how the performance changed.
With the new asset allocation.
The new asset allocation, yes.
Oh, so you're asking if we'll be able to do attribution like we did today versus the new? Yes, of course.
I don't think you got it right. I was suggesting that we keep this reference available to us and then show how the performance changes over a period of time in the next 6 months. So we can actually see it available to us. So we don't have to keep referring back to the old one.
I think I understand. So the attribution charts we've shown you today just for the 1 month, we can show that for any period you want.
He doesn't want to see an attribution chart. What he wants is the attribution chart that you currently have in the form of a graph.
In the form of a graph.
So instead of this bar graph, he wants a line graph.
Okay,
So, the way that would be, I guess, is you would compare the benchmark as one graph, and then you compare these as a red graph laying on top of the actual,
It'd be more visual, so
So more visual, that's what I'm saying, for me anyways.
okay. Yeah, we can do that. We can do a cumulative performance fund versus benchmark.
Yeah, so you plot the benchmark, and then you plot this thing over and under it in the form of a line.
Yep.
You got it? Okay. Or you can have a phone call on it. We can have a phone call later on this, if you want to talk about it for now. Not get a good read over there.
Can't hear you.
Oh, we could just have an offline phone call about this if you want.
Did you hear?
Sorry, Rich, I didn't really catch that. Apologies.
Why don't we just have an offline phone call on this?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
To the IPS, as the previous meeting, you recall that we reviewed the IPS as it was being presented to the board, and then we needed to go through our procedures of having legal counsel review it before we could actually approve it. So we have done that. We have gotten the okay from legal counsel that it is okay to proceed. So as being presented, we would need a motion in order to accept the IPS as being presented.
So we make a comment, motion?
We have a motion.
I second.
We have a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, thank you. Moving on to strategic initiatives.
You can pass it on.
I will defer to you. Kurt, you want to?
Do you want to talk or do you want to I'm gonna pass it on to Crystal.
Okay.
If you guys look in your packet, I put in there just a brief overview of where we currently stand with our measures of beacon points. So far, everything is looking like we're on track to serve as many consumers as we did the last fiscal year, and even more. I also have on there, the next page, we have our match programs. Same thing, we're on track to serve the same amount of clients as we did last year. If there's anything specific you guys have questions on, please feel free to ask. I am happy to answer. Going once?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is that it for strategic initiatives? Okay, all righty, we're moving on to new projects.
So Blue Sky should be ready March 15th.
March 15th?
We should get that copy.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you, Rich. All right, moving right along into operations. Preston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think first on the agenda for operations would be
A reminder that we'll be hopefully seeing you all again here tomorrow for our board development. David Fettman will be here to conduct that. It's only about 3 hours long, 3 hours of your time. And I would just urge you to be here. I think it'd be well worth our time. David Fettman has a long history in this subject matter and has been very impactful with the board's development. So again, I know everybody's got tough schedules, but I would appreciate your attendance. I think the more of us that can be here, the more effective we can be as board members. And I firmly believe we can all get better at whatever we do. So thank you. And you can get on to me. It was my idea, so it's all my fault for having more development. So don't hold against Kirk or whatever.
Is it videotape or any chance I'm gonna be out of town? I can't get out of
Is it being videotaped? No.
that. Okay, I'll coordinate.
Yeah, under our operation manual, just a couple of things. I mean, last month we did approve the acquisition of a car, and I know you're in the process of putting together an operation manual for our car policy. So just be note that that's being worked on now. That'll be forthcoming. Should we have that for next board meeting, Deborah?
No later than April.
No, that April, okay. I think there's other things that we're talking about also is a public information request policy, contact by the media kind of policy. Also to talk about, requests for funding process, policy, granting, monitoring funding, and also we've got the Beacon Point East coming up, right? Yes. So the standby, those are things that are being worked on now. Moving on to a public relations firm, we have decided to seek your approval, Madam Chair, to take on perhaps a public relationship firm, and I'll let perhaps Clerk Deborah can get some more detail on the firm that we have identified.
Yes. Deborah and I have been looking into this for several months, and the goal was to find an overarching public relations firm that would not only develop unified messaging for our partners, for us, but also utilize our marketing firm's prowess and make sure that from our stakeholders receiving consistent information, because we have all these individual contracts and all these individual requirements for each one. This group would provide not only the copy, but also the direction, not only for staff, but also for our marketing firm to provide balanced messaging on our outcomes, on our collaborations, and one, to help citizens identify what services are best for them, and then also providing balanced information when we're writing for appropriations or we're going after funding like we do every year for substance use disorder and behavioral health, where the messaging that comes out from multiple sources is balanced and has multiple perspectives. So if someone were to look up our outcomes and the work that we do in Marion County, it would be reflective of something that the funders would be interested in continuing to help our citizens with, such as, we have 2 appropriations right now that are going through the state for domestic violence, flow-through dollars, but that's a couple $1 million that is in balance, and we want to ensure that the information that this public relations firm helps us put together is messaging that will allow us to not only get new funding, but maintain our current funding. So it is $4,000 per month, which is all encompassing, even though it says a $4,000 retainer. It is kind of like our mindshare contract, where basically they can work 10 hours or they can work 40 hours for us, and there would not be an increase in the dollar amount based on our needs. And so I'm asking that it is a annual contract, however, if for any reason we don't see the value that we expect from this, then we can cancel with a 30-day notice. And I think this would be very valuable for us moving forward with our messaging.
And where will, so as it relates to the budget,
Yes.
where does this come out of the budget?
We identified a line item that we found alternative sources for, and that was that under gap analysis?
Yes, that's correct. And there's some built into the operations budget, under the PR marketing line item.
So we feel we wouldn't need to ask for additional budgetary funding. We can take it out of the existing line item.
Is there a minimum hours that they put per month?
Minimum, it depends on what our needs are, so no. But similar to Mindshare, especially in the beginning, we will utilize them considerably.
Yeah, I just would echo what you said, Kirk, and that is that, given the scope of what this board does here, and I think we have a credible story to tell, we just need to be more consistent in how we tell our story and make sure that we are crossing all lines and really doing a better job with telling our story. So I think to me, it's a wise strategic move for us to find a way to leverage off what we do here. And I'm heard from you, Kirk, this firm here, we found a pretty reputable firm out of Tallahassee.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we have other questions regarding it? It was in the package. Did everyone get to read it? If there's no questions, we need to ask for a motion.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Uh-huh. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, Justin.
Madam Chair. Finally, on the operational agenda would be to ratify the Gooding Batzel contract. Last month, we did approve to engage the law firm of Gooding and Batzel. And then we have it here for your package today, a copy of that contract. I don't know if I mentioned it last month, but in that process of selecting Gooding and Batzel, their hourly fee, correct me if I'm wrong here, Kirk, was about $100. Well, it was $100 less on the hourly fee than the other candidates. So again, we feel like we've got the right attorney in place here, as well as for a very, very affordable price. So anyways, it's there for action.
Okay, so we need to ask for a motion.
A question,
Yes,
just trying to make sure. It was pointed out that I use that firm, and I just want to make sure that I'm allowed to vote.
I'll begin to talk into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I just need to know if I'm allowed to vote or not. I use that firm a lot. Last time when we voted for them, I did not think about that.
so we need to ask our legal counsel.
And Harvey, I'm happy to get back to you on that. We did research that specifically coming into this, but we can come back to you with an answer on that.
So why don't we exclude you from the vote so that we can,
Yeah, and also, we're on the subject also, as some of you may know, I'm also a trustee for the college. And there are some cases where this body here has had some contractual agreements with the college. That did come up into some discussion. It was determined that if in fact that was to come up again, that we would have to use an alternate attorney, both this body here, but as well as the college would have alternate counsel to make sure there's no conflict of interest with Gooding and Batzel. So I think that, I've been told that is, I talked to Jim Henningsen, he said that was in place in the college inn, and I'm assuming we have that taken care of on our end too. Okay.
So one recommendation, so Rob will probably be here later on in this meeting, right?
Correct.
So why don't we table that until
Okay.
he comes here?
Okay.
Because
Okay. He's researched that?
Yes, he is
Okay.
aware of that, yes.
All right, so we'll table that one. Okay. In the meantime, well, he's texting, so. Rusty, was there anything else?
That was enough.
Okay,
We'll hold off on that until Rob gets here.
yes, yes. but we can move into legal. What, Deborah?
Absolutely. So we're on to the legal section. One, I didn't know if you were prepared to introduce you and your firm and your representation today. And then also, I know you're prepared for the discussion on the start progress.
That's correct. And just for those of you who I haven't had the opportunity to meet before, my name is Mac McKay, and as you know, I'm a
Can you
lawyer.
please speak into the microphone?
Sure. As you know, I'm a lawyer with the law firm of Good and Batzel. I wanted to let you all know how humbled and thankful both myself and the firm are to be selected to serve as your legal counsel for the hospital district. This is especially true in light of the incredible work that we all know the hospital district does on behalf of the community. So thank you again for this opportunity. And on behalf of myself and the firm, I want you to know what an honor it is to serve as your legal counsel, and we're really looking forward to working with you. It will be a rotation of both myself, Rob Batzel, and James Hartley, depending on the meeting, but we'll all be present, prepared to discuss any topics you may have at the meetings. So thank you again for your consideration.
Okay,
And if you'd like me to move into the Stark violations, I can do so.
please.
So in March, just as a way of background for those of you that are not fully aware, in March of 2016, Community Health System submitted a voluntary self-disclosure of Stark law violations to Centers for Medicare Services. As the designated representative of Monroe HMA Hospital LLC, that was a DBA of Monroe Regional Medical Center, the violations fell into two general categories. The first was the hospital staff's professional courtesy policy, and the second was some certain chief of staff medical director arrangements. Sandy Tuplitsky, a lawyer from Baker Donaldson, has been representing CHS throughout this process. And on some good news, due to some subsequent clarifications in the law that have been issued by the federal government that render the violations related to the chief of medical staff arrangements moot, those can be withdrawn at this point, and we're not liable for any of those penalties. Now, as to the issue of the hospital's staff professional courtesy policy, there was previously a policy allowing all active, non-employed members of the hospital's medical staff and their dependent family members to receive a medical expense credit up to $5,000 per calendar year. Now, pursuant to that policy, the professional courtesy credit was offered to all the non-employed medical staff physicians in light of that provision for free or discounted services to the community residents. There's an important statute. This is at 42 CFR section 411.357 S1 that permits professional courtesy credits so long as the professional courtesy is offered to all physicians on the entity's bona fide medical staff or in such entity's local community or service area, and the offer does not take into account the volume or value of referrals or other business generated between the parties. Now, because the professional courtesy credit was offered to only the non-employed medical staff physicians on the hospital staff and not the employed medical staff members, this arrangement was non-compliant. The reason that the hospital district is liable for the Stark violations is Article 9.9C, which is titled Representations and Warranties of Lessor and MRHS of the Lease and Purchase Agreement between CHS and the district, which expressly warranted that there were no Stark violations at the time of the closing on April 1st, 2014. So, for the purposes of determining the Medicare referrals to include in the professional courtesy credit Medicare payments calculation, the hospital identified each date in which an active, non-employed medical staff member was issued a professional courtesy credit between March 1st, 2012, which is the start of the applicable period they look back to, through March 31st, 2014, which is when the hospital ceased all of the non-compliant professional courtesy credit payments. So between that time period of March 1st, 2012 and March 31st, 2014, the hospital received Medicare payments for services provided as a result of referrals made by professional courtesy credit physicians in the amount of $2.2 million approximately. However, these can be resolved pursuant to a settlement agreement which requires a payment by the hospital district of somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $150,000. Now, we've spoken to Mr. Tuplitsky from Baker Donaldson, and based on his experience in the past, he believes this will resolve approximately $100,000 to $110,000. And pursuant to the lease and purchase agreement, CHS will continue to pay, they've paid so far, and they'll continue to pay Mr. Teplitsky's attorney's fees and costs. But the district will ultimately be responsible for any settlement or reimbursement of overpayments to Medicare. Mr. Teplitsky has extensive experience in this area of law, and he believes there's very little work left to be done at this point. If the district approves his retention, he'll continue working with CMS, the Center for Medicare Services, and report back to the trustees. He's informed us this is likely to include a request for approval of a certification at a future meeting, providing for the withdrawal of the medical director agreements, followed by consideration and approval of a settlement agreement upon receipt from CMS. It's important to note that this settlement would result in the district paying approximately 5% of the total penalty and would foreclose all future governmental inquiries related to this matter. We've also been told it will hopefully be concluded within a couple months, so it will not be a long, drawn-out process over a matter of years. And it's also important to note that if we did not proceed in this manner, it could result in CMS terminating the voluntary disclosure process and demanding full reimbursement of the overpayment. Based on our conversations with Mr. Teplitsky, he's been extremely competent and informative and helpful to us in this process, and we're really grateful for that. And we're confident in his ability to represent the district's interests, and we respectfully recommend the trustees approve his engagement with regards to that matter. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this point.
You said 5% of the total penalty is what we're like, so what's the penalty?
So the penalty in total would be $2.2 million, and how they get to that number is the hospital included in its Medicare or referral calculation, not only the date the credit was issued to the physician and his families, but also all the Medicare referrals that physician made by that to the hospital for 4 weeks after the credit. So that's why the number is $2.2 million.
And they want 100% reimbursement for those payments that they made?
If we did not enter into this settlement agreement, that's correct. Whereas in the settlement agreement, it's settled for about 5% based on what Mr. Teplitsky's telling us. It's somewhere between $75,000 and $150,000, with it likely being in the low $100,000 range.
How come this was not brought to the district before?
It was.
It's been in the works all the time?
Yeah, it's just been 5 or 6 years since it came up before, and it
It's dormant.
is dormant.
And while there's nothing in the lease and purchase agreement, from what I've seen, this and been told, this was represented to the district as part of an issue when CHS executed the purchase agreement.
So Mr. Teplitsky is being paid by CHS right now, and then we're going to take it over?
Correct. He will continue to be paid by CHS.
So how come we are involved?
Because the CHS had the generous opinion of telling them that we were in violation. So they were ringing the bell for us.
So they want to stop paying him, and we're going to take it over?
No, they will continue to pay him, but we will ultimately be responsible for any and all settlement payments. But he would serve as the district's lawyer and not as CHS's lawyer.
So we are looking at a settlement of $110,000
That's right.
for it.
I mean, I guess no one looked into what was the employees, what were they getting? Maybe they're getting the same thing, but it's close to
So from what we've looked into, everyone got the same $5,000 credit, whether it was a physician or an employee.
So then why are we in trouble?
So it's because it was only offered to and I'm sorry, I may have misstated your findings to that. What it was offered to is only the non-employee physicians and their families.
But what was offered to the physicians that were employed?
Nothing, and that's why we're in violation, because the statute says that you have to offer it. If you offer it to one group, you offer it to
Is
both.
that case?
Well, I was not employed by the hospital.
So you
So I'm an unemployed person.
Right.
But
And we're sure that the doctors that were employed were not getting any credit.
Correct.
We're sure.
Yes. And we can send them.
Under a different name, like under a total compensation package. That's not called a credit, it's called something else, but prima facie, it's exactly the same thing.
Based on all the documents we've seen, which we can forward to the trustees for consideration as well, they were not offered the same.
Those things, I'll
Sure.
sleep about half page. But what I am requesting is to someone specifically going back to the doctors that were employed and asking them, part of their compensation package was any credit issued to them for services that were provided to them while they were employed, to either them or their family, rendered by the hospital.
And we can go back and ask them
That's
directly.
not the case, to be quite honest with you.
Okay.
It's hard to believe that's not
And we can go back to them directly and report back to the board and the trustees if you'd like us to.
true.
And
Yeah,
ask
it's
them
just a
all whether or
simple
not
question,
they-
not no big.
Sure. But to date, from the documents we've reviewed, we've seen no evidence of that.
Again, I just wonder if we actually looked into a compensation.
Question. With the current case, do we have time for that? I mean,
Yes, so moving forward, there's not much time left. We've got a couple months before there will be a settlement agreement signed, so we've got time to make that happen.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that being said, we're going to hold off on voting on this until we get that answer back.
If that's okay. with you.
Absolutely. Anybody have any objections to that?
No, I just questioned this, so again, where do we find the funds to pay for this? Just
We can add a budget line item with no corresponding decrease anywhere else. The target set by the trustees is the internal target, it's not required, it's not statutory. So any amount can be added for wind down operations, that's what happened in the past. Settlements related to the old hospital operations. Otherwise, there is $244,000 in the trustee undesignated fund as well for this current fiscal year.
Anything else we need to address on this? Thank you. All right, Matt?
Okay, so the review of the financials for January of 2024 begins on page 67 in your packet. Like prior periods, we've represented the January 31st balance sheet compared to the prior month, which would be December, as well as the prior year, which is September 3rd. And then on the income statement, we have this month compared to year-to-date, compared to year-to-date last year. So no change in the presentation. The balance sheet and income statement are significantly driven by the investment operation, the outcome of the investments, which was about $1.4 million in total earnings for the month of January. Otherwise, the rest of the remaining operations are in line with the pre-approved budget. We're on pace to fulfill the budget without exceeding any significant budget line items. Any questions about financial statement included in your packet?
No questions? Okay, with no questions on the table, we need a motion to accept the financials.
motion?
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second.
We have a second, all in favor? Motion passes. Yes, ma'am?
This is a matter of housekeeping. Purpose Grade, the audit firm engaged in the financial statement audit of the Marion County Hospital District, is expected to be here to present the audit at the March trustee meeting. So the conclusion of the audit is imminent in the next day or two. Or, I'm sorry, next week or two.
Okay. Did you?
I've just followed up with Rob, but have not heard back from him. So
Okay. Alrighty, let's see if we have any old business. No?
Is what's the status of the playground? Has that changed at all? Okay. I think so, but.
Okay, how do we want to approach the contract for Rob?
One,
Well, I mean,
on the safe side, we'll just recuse ourselves.
does he work for you too? Okay.
There's nothing out of the corner.
No, we still have.
If you want to be on the safe side, just have those two trustees accuse themselves.
So if y'all recuse yourself, then we can get ruling on that for future votes.
So we might want to use vote by individual, that way,
Okay,
if you're individually recusing.
okay. So, we first need a motion.
A question about that.
Yes,
Does he need anything that's written up ahead of time or written up?
they have forms that they will sign.
Okay.
Okay, so, we need a motion to accept the contract.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we need to vote now. So do we need to confirm he is voting as excluding himself?
Oh,
You're
no,
You're not recusing
I did
yourself?
not, yeah, it does
Okay.
not work for the bank.
So,
For
Rusty,
me. Aye.
okay, Ron?
Aye.
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 Recluse.
Okay, we have a majority, so the motion passes to accept the contract. Thank you. All right, nothing else that we need to cover today? All right, we're adjourned.